You should see that pop up in your screen. All right, so I think I've seen most of you before, but in case I haven't seen you or you haven't seen me, my name is Lauren Barbeau. I'm the faculty developer in the Center for Teaching Excellence, and my job is to deal with basically anything that's not folio. So if you have a folio question, we have a couple of folio experts who are in this meeting and can answer that question for you. But if your question pertains to basically any technology teaching tools outside of folio, I'm your go-to. So let's get started today by talking about what a Google form can do that might be more useful to you than maybe folio. Okay, by the end of today's session, you're going to be able to identify the pros and cons of using Google Forms for assessments rather than folio. Um, like I said, there are a lot of things that folio does and does a lot better than a Google form. But then there are going to be some special cases where you might decide a Google assessment is more useful for you. You're also going to be able to set up a Google form with randomized questions and file upload options. So if you've never used the folio assessment or the Google Forms assessment option, it's not the exact same thing as setting up a form. It is a little bit different. It does have a lot more options with it. So finally, what you're going to be able to do is manage the back-end submissions that you get through your Google form, including accessing any files that students uploaded. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you're welcome to set up your own Google form as a sort of sandbox for you to play in a side-by-side window, or you're welcome to just watch and take notes on what it is that I'm doing. We are also recording this, so if you would like to have that step-by-step tutorial as you're setting it up later on, hopefully you'll be able to go back and access that. Okay, so the easiest way to get started with a Google form, I find, is to go to the folder that you want to set up your Google form in. And I think you're just seeing the one window I shared, which is the sample form. But like anything else in Drive, you would want to go to the folder in which you're storing it and hit New. And when you hit New, it's going to pop up a whole bunch of options, and Google Forms isn't one of them until you go to More. So then you can go to Google Forms and you can create a new form, either from a template that you've already created or a blank form. We're going to go ahead and start with a blank form. If you don't want to set it up in a particular folder and you just want to go to a sandbox, another option is to go to your Google Apps widget up in the right-hand corner of pretty much any window, and you can scroll down until you find Forms in that window. And that's just going to take you to a generic form, but be aware that if you're super organized, which I am, I really dislike disorganized files. If you just do something that way, it's not going to be housed in the file or in the folder you want it in. You'll need to move it later. So I always tend to do things from the folder that I want them created in the first place. Okay, so your form is going to look pretty different than what my form looks like, right? If I just go over here and I open a new form, it's purple. Yours is not purple. Or yours is purple as well. Yours is not this nice green sciencey background, but I'm going to show you how to change all of those things. And we're going to start first by looking to title our form. So we're going to call this sample form 2. And you'll note that here I can add a description. And maybe I just want to put the date on it. Or maybe I want to put a longer set of instructions here for students. Whatever it is that you want to do, this is where you kind of put the generic information that you put at the top of every single test or assessment. We're going to get into the complicated process of setting up form questions, but before we get down to everything down here, what I want to show you are your options up here. So we're going to start with the palette button, which is the customize theme. So this is where you can choose a header. You can upload your own if you prefer, or you can choose something from your Google Photos. If this isn't important to you, no big deal. We can move on, but I like people to be able to see that you have these options. So you can change your background color as well as your theme colors, and if you've chosen one of the presets, it's going to give you some recommended colors to work with. You can also change your fonts, but for accessibility purposes, it's probably best, unless you're doing like wedding RSVPs, that you don't go with decorative. Stick with this nice sample basic font. Okay, so if you've ever gotten on any of our CTE forms, you'll notice that they're branded with the CTE logo and Georgia Southern colors. That's how you do that. The next option is the I, which if you've worked with forms at all before, you know is the view option. It's pretty simple, but the one thing I want to stress here is when you share things with your students, please make sure you share this link from the view page. If by accident you share this link from the edit page, which I have done many times, the students are going to get all of the background access to the form, including answers to the questions that you might have put in the answer key. So you can see why that would be a really bad thing. And it's important for you to make sure that you're using that I link as opposed to the edit link. So always double check that. There's a lot more at stake with an assessment than there is with an action plan form. The next option you have is the settings gear. And we're going to spend a little bit of time here because this is the first step in really setting up Google Forms for assessment. You're probably going to want to set your form to collect email addresses. This just makes you more aware of who has submitted what. It's going to require students to sign in with their Georgia Southern email address to be able to access your assessment. So with Folio, obviously, it's all vetted and it's locked down within the Georgia Southern system. When you're working with Google, you have the option to make things available to users who are outside the Georgia Southern system, depending on your share settings. If you turn on collect email addresses, it's going to limit that to people who are in the Georgia Southern system. That's part of the reason why I recommend you turning that on. I do not recommend you turning on response receipts for the simple reason that respondents are going to receive a copy of their responses if you turn this on. Now, for me, when I'm collecting your action plans or capstone reflections, I want you to have a copy of your action plans, so I turn this on. But if you're giving an exam or a quiz, you probably don't want your students to receive copies of their responses because it makes it too easy to share with other students. So that's why I say leave this off. You can restrict this to Georgia Southern users if that's, again, a concern. I mentioned that with collecting email addresses. You can limit this to one response. Be aware that if you don't, this is going to allow them to come back and edit things. Or to submit multiple quizzes is actually what's going to happen. So you probably don't want your students to forget that they took the final and decide to take it again. So I would turn on limit to one response. You can allow students to edit things after they submit it, but since we're talking about assessments today, we probably don't want that. If I'm talking about a capstone reflection, I might turn this on because I don't care if you edit your response afterwards. And again, for an assessment, I probably don't need you to be able to see a chart summary or a text summary response of what other people said. So those are the general settings for our form. The next thing we can do is go to presentation, and you have a couple of options to turn on here. The first one is the progress bar. Now, what do we mean by progress bar? Maybe some of you know what that means and maybe some of you don't. So I'm just going to hop over and show you just in case. If you've ever filled out an action plan, you'll notice there's this bar at the bottom that shows you how many pages there are and how far you are through it. That's the progress bar. So you can choose to turn that on or leave it off. I would recommend that since we're using this for assessments, that's what we're here to talk about, you shuffle the question order. Makes it a little bit more difficult for students to cheat. And when students submit their final quiz or test, you can have a personalized response message pop up. So let's put something in here. All right, so we have our personalized message to students that'll pop up when they hit submit. You can also embed any links in there just in case you want them to go to a link. Maybe you made a congratulatory video that you want to put a link to in there. You can do that. The final part I want to talk about under settings is quizzes. If we're using this for assessments, you want to turn this on. And you can do this first if you want, doesn't matter. I want you to note that the locked mode doesn't apply to us. So Google Forms does have options to kind of put your device in lockdown. But if you read this little message, it's very specific to managed Chromebooks, which we're not using. So we can't turn on locked mode. It's not going to help us. You have options in terms of how grades are released to students when they take your assessment. If you're doing a short little multiple choice question answer sort of thing and you're just doing quick formative feedback, you might want them to get an immediate pop-up after each submission that says, here's what you got right, here's what you got wrong. And you also have the option to embed feedback with the right answer and why it's the right answer or why it's the wrong answer. For most of you, I'm thinking later after manual review is going to be what you want. Now, please note if you choose this, it is going to turn on that email collection option, which we already turned on anyway under general settings, so it's not a big deal. This is where you have the choice of what respondents can see in terms of their submissions. So do you want them to see the missed questions? Do you want them to see correct answers and point values? If you have questions about what any of that does, you can hover over this question mark and it's going to tell you what it will do if you enable that. Now, I might want them to see point values, but I don't want them to see the correct answers. And maybe I don't want them to see the missed questions right now either. Maybe I just want them to know how much things are worth. Whatever your choices are pedagogically, fine, but do make sure you save. All right, so now that we've turned on assessments, there are some slight changes that have happened. You'll notice that there's a total points option up here in the upper right-hand corner. And now we're going to take a look at starting some of our questions here. How do we set up questions? Right, so you can begin by typing a question. Right, so I've started by asking, what's the capital of the United States? Oh, so cool. The other day, I'm going to try this. The other day, I was playing around with this, and it gave me a suggested answer. It's not going to do it today. It was really cool and kind of creepy that there was a little box that popped up here, and Google said, suggested answer, Little Rock. Oh, wow, Google, you're getting really smart these days. So this is where I would go to type my question. This is where I would go to change the way that students respond to my question. Now, obviously, for a question like this, multiple choice probably makes sense. But if I change it and just say name, Google automatically assumes what kind of question I want based on whatever I type in this box. So it's going to auto update that for me. Now you can override that if you want to, but this is just for you to know that you don't have to pre-choose what kind of question it is. It's probably best to start by typing your question in first and letting Google guess what it thinks are the best options for you and changing it later. So that is a neat feature. But if we go over here, you have a whole bunch of different options in terms of how students can respond to the types of questions you're putting in. If there are any particular questions about these, please do stop me. I'm not going to dwell on all of them just because some of them they're fairly simple. If you've put together a test or a quiz, you're probably going to be okay choosing your own form for responses. So I'm not going to go over all of them. What I do want to focus on for a second is this file upload option. I am going to have to choose to link another folder with this form because that's where their uploaded files are going to be stored so I can access them later. But it really is as simple as clicking on the file upload option. And I can even decide what kind of files I want them to submit. So if I only want a document, a PDF, I can limit it just to those things, and students who try to put in a video or an image file, they're going to have their responses kicked back to them. I can choose the maximum number of files that they can upload. So say that I'm doing an assessment where I want them to upload multiple images. I could set that to 5. Unfortunately, there's really not a whole lot of nuance. It's only 1, 5, or 10, but you know, we'll survive. There is a limit in terms of how big or how big the files can be that they upload. They can only upload a maximum of 1 GB files to any sort of present or form. So please be aware if you're wanting students to upload videos or things like that, or multiple videos, it's going to get too heavy, too big for the form, and they're not going to be able to do that. So whatever you do design, just make sure that the file sizes are going to be small enough that students can upload everything they need to get uploaded. Okay. Are there any questions about the file upload option from the front end? We can look at the back end a little bit later, but I want to make sure, because I know this is one of the reasons I'm giving this workshop, is people had questions about this. Yeah, there is a 10 GB option, Steve. I do use this file upload option for a couple of the forms we use in the center. I think that the Google administrators must have set this up so that 1 is the max we can get, because I cannot set it to 10. I don't know why. That seems to be something that's on the back end of how they're managing Google. So you'd have to ask IT about that. But yeah, unfortunately, 1 is the most we can get. We do have some more complicated options down here in terms of question and answer. If you're wanting students to do a timeline, you could do a linear scale. The multiple choice grid boxes I've used for feedback. If any of you attended the Faculty Professional Development Day and gave feedback on sessions, this is how we collected that information. You can also have checkbox grids. So multiple choice, obviously, they only give you 1 answer. The checkbox grid is going to allow you to check multiple options. If I've seen issues with anyone using forms, it's oftentimes that they don't distinguish between multiple choice versus checkboxes. So, for instance, we've had some forms where some faculty check all of the options. It's like, well, that actually should have been set to multiple choice because we only wanted you to choose 1. So please do be aware of what it is you want students to do. Checkboxes let you choose multiple options. Multiple choice only lets you choose 1. If for any reason you wanted to include a date and time, let's say that you wanted your students to start each test or quiz by signing an academic integrity statement, which is something many of us do, and that research has shown does decrease instances of academic integrity violations, decreases them to some extent. You could have them do that by putting in, let's say I'm going to have you put in your name. And then I'm going to move that by dragging these dots up here. I'll put that at the top. And then date. So if I wanted to put the AI statement in here, I have some options to do that. I could either put it up here in the description, which I probably don't want because it's not a description of the entire assessment. Or I could add question option. But I don't really want to ask a question there, do I? I mean, I can add it as a multiple choice. Do you agree with this? Yes or no. Or I could add a title and description. So I could copy paste my academic integrity statement here. Hopefully it's a little bit more complicated than that. Oops, We don't want to look at the code. I can drag that to the top. I can put name here, and then I can have them date when they agreed with the academic integrity statement. So that might be something you could consider adding to your form designs, just because it does to some degree decrease plagiarism. Okay, so let's look at some more of our types of questions here. You can add a time if you want to date and time something, and nice pops up, easy for you. All right, questions about questions. Hearing none, I'm going to move on to the options down here. I'm going to save answer key because it's a little bit more complicated. If you're using the same kind of question over and over, so let's say you're using multiple choice questions and you're kind of only slightly altering it, instead of rewriting the question every time, you can just duplicate it and change not to is or whatever it is you need to change. If you decide you don't like it, you have the delete option. Here is the important part about these little icons down here in the bottom right. You want to set your questions to required. If you don't set them to required, students can skip them and nothing's going to happen. They can submit the form without having answered every single question. Now, if you're okay with that, say it's multiple choice and you want them to be able to leave things blank if they didn't understand it, you can leave that off. It is auto set to off. It is not auto set to on. I tend to like to turn that option on because otherwise I have faculty who overlook important questions. And this will not allow you to either submit a form or progress to another page if you've turned on the required option and they haven't done that. Under the three dots, you have your more options. Three dots always means more in Google. If you wanted to add a description to a question, so let's say that you want to add and we're going to talk about the Constitutional Convention, and I want to add a description of what happened at that, and then I want you to write me a long paragraph answer about the importance of the Constitutional Convention to American democracy or something like that. Or let's say I wanted to do case study 1. If I had a particular type of case study that I wanted you to look at, and I'm going to copy paste that in the description. So this is really for your more complex questions that you kind of want to put a label on the top of it and then a longer description. I do recommend that you use the description option if you're asking particularly long questions, because if I go to view, these questions, imagine if you have a really long question, these are big. They're going to take up a lot of space. So if I have a description, the font's going to get a little bit smaller. It's not going to take up as much space on the page. So I do recommend for long questions, use that description option. That's what it's there for. Right. I can put response validation on there if I want. For those of you who use spreadsheets and are spreadsheet gurus, response validation is really just saying this is what's permissible in this box and this is what is not permissible in this box. So for instance, we have a what do you call it? A workshop submission sheet. And for a long time, people were getting really long-winded with their titles to the point that it was just not really faculty or reader friendly. So I went in there and I put a maximum character count on there of 500 characters. If you want, this can be numbers, whatever data validation you want to put on there works just fine. Any other questions about the More Options button before I move on to the answer key? Okay. Nope. Awesome. So the answer key is kind of a lifesaver if you are wanting to not manually grade everything. Since this is an open-ended response, all I can do is set points. All right, so maybe I want this to be 50 points out of 100. I can add answer feedback that's going to pop up for students once they hit submit. And I can do that through either a link or through a video that takes them somewhere. But let's say instead we're going to have them do multiple choice. Okay. I have case study 1 here, and you're going to need to choose from a number of different options which is the right answer. And I'm going to lower that. This is going to be a 2-point question instead. So I can put in here the right answer. If I had all of my multiple choice questions entered, it would show up option 1, option 2, option 3 with whatever answer I had put in there, and I would choose what the right answer is. Okay, so it's as simple as that. If I want to give feedback, this nuances it based on incorrect answers or correct answers. So I could give feedback based on, oh, you put in the wrong answer. Maybe you should go watch this video to help you test your knowledge on this subject. Again, that's more of a formative than a summative assessment. But I can also give really encouraging formative or summative feedback by saying, correct, this is the right answer because. So if anybody's using textbook versions of something, they often have these kind of pre-made assessments built in where it gives students formative feedback on their questions as they go. And once you've entered that, all you need to do is hit done, and it will save that for you. How do we give feedback for uploaded files? Okay, so Donna, that's not going to be able to be possible through the form. We'll have to look at the back-end management, which we're going to do before. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but you're going to have to give feedback on uploaded files. You could probably do that through email, or you could do it through, if they've uploaded a Word document, you can do it through the Word document or through the Google Doc. We can talk more specifically about that question later on. It's not an option pre-built into the form. Yeah. So the form is only going to grade really simple multiple choice or checkbox questions. It's not going to grade something like a file upload or even a long answer or a short answer, unless it's a simple fill in the blank sort of thing. I do want to point out that there's an insert image option. So let's see. If I wanted to pull in a pie chart, I don't know why I want my pie chart, but I want a pie chart of something in this question, and I want them to answer a question about this pie chart. I can pull that in. I can upload my own. You notice that there are a whole bunch of different options for doing that. So I can either, I could even take a picture of myself if I really want to. Number of different options for uploading pictures that you want your students to respond to in a quiz question. So kind of nice for those of you who are quizzing students on particular visuals, anatomy and physiology or something like that. Okay. Are there questions about this question box here? Because if not, I'm going to go on to this sidebar that you see on the right. Okay. So we've been over the add question button. I think you've seen me use it. I didn't call it out specifically, but that's what it is. This next button, the import questions, can be really useful if you're giving the same quiz or the same test multiple times. Or like me, I create a lot of the same forms. So if I go to import, let's see. Let's say I want to pull in something from the scheduling form. I can pull in first name and last name or whatever questions I've got pre-made and not have to remake them, which is a nice feature so that I'm not constantly having to reinvent the wheel. And you'll notice that it kept my formatting and made them required because I imported them. And if you just make it yourself, the required button's not going to be on. If you're importing, it is going to take all of your pre-formatting. So that does mean it's going to pull over your answer key and the points and all of those things. So you can see how this would be really valuable if you have a couple of questions that you want to keep pulling over from different workshops. I've shown you what the title and description can do up here when we talked about the academic integrity statement. Note that there are no questions associated with this. This is really just kind of a section header where you might want students to read something and get some information first. I have the option to insert an image that's not going to be associated with one question. So let's pull in a periodic table here. Let's say that I want my students to be able to access the periodic table during their chemistry exam. Okay, so that's gone all the way to the bottom. I don't want this all the way at the bottom. I want it at the top of my page, right under my academic integrity statement. Kind of slow going because it doesn't have the nice little up arrows for you. But all right. So I can title my image and I can let students know what questions I want them to use it for instance. So on this page, I could have 5 questions that all relate to this periodic table. Now, how would I break out pages after I've added this image? I could also add a video, by the way. So let's think maybe I'm in a physics class and I want to show a physics demonstration and ask a series of questions about what principles are at work in the video, or describe what's happening at this moment in the video. I can pull in by URL or from YouTube. I can search for whatever it is. If I know what I'm looking for, makes it easy for me to do that. Let's pull in a 5-minute one. And so I can title my video, and again, I can tell my students what questions they're going to need to refer to this video for. And that makes it easy for me to integrate multivariable learning elements into this assessment. Now, since my periodic table is only for questions 1 through 5, I probably don't want questions 6 through 10 on the same page. How do I do that? Well, that is what happens when you add a section header. Okay, so section headers are going to break the form into multiple pages. So I've inserted this section header and I'm going to put a description. This is the part of the exam that's about pie charts. And I can tell them refer to. So I can put some instructions at the top of that. Now, what is this going to do? When I hit view, you'll notice that I now have information that I have to fill out before I can go on to the next section, right? So let's say I'm just going to put in, I'm going to answer something so we can move on. And we move on to the second section of our exam at this point. So this is a nice way of chunking parts of your exam so that students aren't overwhelmed by one huge long page. It's also a way of making sure that things are kind of progress is getting saved, I guess. Please be aware that if a student doesn't ultimately hit submit, if they close the window and they have not hit submit, it's not saved somewhere. It's just gone. So it's not like a lot of the LMS related integrations where it will save partial answers. This one, they disappear. So that's kind of an important thing for them to know. If they close out of it, they're going to have to start over, which sucks. Okay, so I've talked about section headers at this point and how you can organize your assessment depending on how long it is. Are there any questions for me about using a Google form or setting it up on the question end of things? Because the next thing we're going to do is talk about responses. So I want to make sure that we are done with this page of information. Okay. If for any reason, I'll point this out as kind of bonus information, you have the opportunity to decide what section of the form participants continue on to based on their answer. So this is kind of a fancier setting. I do use this for some of our forms that based on our participants' response. So for instance, we have capstone reflections, right? For those of you who are doing badges. And the capstone reflection prompts are different for the teaching with technology and the evidence-based teaching track versus the professional planning and growth track. So there's one prompt for the teaching-based ones, and there's another prompt for the professional planning and growth. I use this go-to section to funnel you to the right response or right response prompt based on your answer. So when you select professional planning and growth, I tell it you're going to go to section 2, which is the professional planning and growth response section. And you're going to skip over section 1, which is the teaching badges form response. So if for any reason you're trying to do a nuanced thing like that, like say you want them to have 3 different essay prompt choices and you only want them to see one, you could have a multiple choice section of your quiz where you say, please select the essay that you would like to write, and you could have it direct them to just that prompt by using this go to section option. But in order to use this, you do have to be creating sections to your assessment, because if you have it all in one long thing, it's not going to give you the option to go to next section. Okay, that was bonus material. All right, now we're going to move over to responses so that you can look at what happens when students finally submit their responses. Now, this is obviously blank because no one is responding here. So I am going to give you something that does have responses so we can take a look at that and see what happens when people start submitting things. But before we look at something that's all gunked up with answers, I want to take a look at a couple of these different options here. When you're ready to close your assessment, you'll go to accepting responses and turn it off. Please note that unlike Folio, this is not going to happen automatically after a time limit. Google does not have that option at the current moment. So you will need to remember to shut your assessment when you're ready for students to no longer have access to it. Otherwise, they're just going to keep having access to it. Now, it doesn't mean you can't throw out anything that was submitted after the due date. You're welcome to do that. But they might complain and say, well, I was able to complete it. Whereas if you turn this off, they're not going to be able to complete it at all. You do have the option to put in a message, a personalized message here if for some reason you want to, like, sorry, this form is closed. If you missed this test, then you need to send me an email at this email address. You can have it link out to a web page, whatever it is you want them to link out to. Okay. You again have your 3 dots, which means you have more options here. If you really want, you can turn on email notifications every time someone submits a new response. So for instance, when I'm managing the capstone reflections, I have it turned on to get a response every time someone submits a capstone reflection. It doesn't mean that I can jump right over there and read it right away, but it does remind me that I need to be getting in and looking at these responses. For many of you who are doing this kind of like on a timed assessment basis, this might not be useful, but I wanted you to know that you have that option. You can select a response destination in the sense that if you already have a Google form set up, or not a form, sorry, a sheet set up somewhere, you can tell it to go to a specific sheet. If you don't tell it to go to a specific sheet, it's going to set one up for you, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. If you prefer to work not in Sheets, but in Excel, you can download responses as a CSV file, which is going to open in Excel. And you probably don't want to delete all the responses, but if you do, this is how you would do that. Okay. Now we're going to talk about this create spreadsheet option, which is where if there is not a spreadsheet associated with that particular form, this is how you're going to create that spreadsheet. You just hit that button and it'll auto create it in the same folder that your form is saved in. But for the sake of time, I'm instead going to show you this form that I already have created. So this is our scheduling request form. Most of you have probably not seen it because you've not submitted a request with us before. But if I go over to responses, you'll see it looks a lot different than that blank form we were looking at before. So I have ways to break down how I'm getting the 45 responses. Do I want to see a summary? If I see a summary, it's going to give me all these nice bar charts and might even give me some graphs. Yep, look, it's got some graphs. This is useful for me to get a really quick picture of, let's say I want to know how many workshops we're offering in a particular badge track. Like, well, we're offering 17 in evidence-based teaching, 11 in folio, and like 5 in teaching with technology. These 2 tracks got combined, so we're actually on point, you know, about 16 and 17. Looks like we're pretty even there. But oh, we don't have a whole lot in professional growth. That might inform me that I need to make some decisions about programming, and it might inform you on how difficult your quiz or test questions are as to how many students were getting those right or wrong. So depending on the type of question you asked, it's going to have sort of a different output look when you go into the back end of the form. If I change that to question, I'm going to get all of the answers to a particular question, department name. And if I change it to individual, it's going to give me a breakdown by each person who submitted a response. This is really not how I prefer to manage things when I'm working with Google Forms. It can be nice for quick snapshots, but especially for those of you who are looking at using this for assessment purposes, you really are going to want to deal with it in sheets. Okay, and this is where things get a little bit more intense if, like me, you're kind of in a cold sweat when you hear people talking about Excel or Sheets. I get a little nervous, but Google Forms creates a very nice organized sheet from all of the information that you were collecting in your form. Okay, now I also want to show you what happens when you have someone upload any sort of attachment. It links out to a Google folder file. Okay, so here's an image. I allow people opportunities to upload images for marketing purposes, and I can easily access those by clicking the link. Now that's the same thing. So if you are having students upload any sort of graphic, Word document, maybe it's not a Word document, maybe it's a Google Doc instead. Really what this is going to do is it's going to create a separate file, folder of files in wherever you stored this form, and it's going to have all of those attachments in that folder. But to make it easy for you to find them based on who submitted them, it's going to give you the link to that file in the folder in your spreadsheet. So that makes it fairly easy to manage students' uploaded submissions. Okay, at this point, I am going to open things for questions because I might have gone over something a little bit too fast, and you might have things that are specific to a way that you want to use the form. I also need to drink water, so you can unmute yourself at this point if you want to ask a question either about forms in general or a particular assessment you have in mind. Okay, so I'm assuming there are no questions and this is very clear.
I don't have any on the chat board.
Okay. Well, I mean, in all honesty, I kind of like to hear that because that means I did my job. Either that or I just confuse the living daylights out of you and you're all like, I'm just head is spinning. Can't do this. Does anybody have any questions about an assessment that they have in mind and how you might set a particular assessment up? I know Donna had asked a question about how do you give feedback on something a student has uploaded. Did I sufficiently answer that question for you, Donna? We're going to go with yes on that.
She didn't answer. But Lauren, can I add something here?
Please do. Yeah.
I think this came about. This workshop came about when we had a few faculty wanting to give exams in folio and be able to upload an image. Well, that's not an option in the quiz tool. So this is a workaround that Lauren wanted to show everybody how to do the assessment.
Yeah. And Donna is saying she'll have to play with it to see how she could use it, because it's going to require a lot. Yeah, Donna, it is going to require a lot of typing. I mean, honestly, it's going to require a lot of setting this up is going to take time. But a Google form that's been well set up makes your life a lot easier. And especially if this is something you plan on using in the future, that import question button, once you started building a question bank, Donna, and you've kind of got that, importing questions is going to make things a lot easier. But building it the first time is going to be time consuming, yes. No, Lisa. So Lisa's asking a question about whether you can add general feedback to a student via the spreadsheet, or is that done via email, docs, etc. So all I have here I think all I have are image files. I don't think I have anything that's like a PDF or a doc. But what would happen here is if a student had uploaded, let's say, a Word doc here, what that would do is it would take me to a pop-out that was really just a Word doc file that I could download to my computer and edit, or I could open with Google Docs and edit and give feedback on. What would happen then is, in order to return that feedback, I would need to email the student this link, or I could download it and attach it in an email. So I think it makes it easy for you to collect any sort of attachments. It's not as easy to return feedback on those attachments. So it's not going to be like Folio, where you can have where you can use Turnitin and grade things and give feedback in that particular tool without really leaving Folio. This is going to require you to use basically all of G Suite. So you would probably get in and look at Google Documents and give feedback in a Google Doc, and you'd link that out to a student. So Donna's saying that she started the question bank in Folio, and having to email every student would be interesting. Yes. So Donna, if you're doing a lot of free answer responses to students, that is the downside of this, is that if you're trying to give feedback on something that students have uploaded, you are going to have to send individual emails, or you're going to have to comment on it and share using these particular links. So you can comment in Google. I think I can put a comment on something that's an image. Maybe not. Okay, I can manage my comment notifications. Oh yeah, okay. So I just use my crosshairs and I can comment on something. And let's say that I wanted Laura to see my comments on this thing. I'm gonna leave all sorts of comments here. What I would do is I would just take this URL, or I could pop over here and I could copy this URL and I could send that to Laura in an email, and she could see all of the comments that I made on whatever the file is here. So I can pop out, I can leave my comments in Google Drive, but the way that I would communicate that to students is by sharing that link in a follow-up email. So there is, if you're teaching a very large class, this is going to be painful, right? And one of the ways that you could do that easily is by using a mail merge add-on. If you're not familiar with mail merges and you use a lot of sheets and you contact a lot of people, mail merges are beautiful. I use them all the time. I have this thing called Yet Another Mail Merge. And so let's say that I wanted to start a mail merge and I'm going to respond to everybody. And I'm gonna include a specialized link to their particular graphic or whatever it is that they uploaded. I would go to my email and I would start a template email. And I would use, I don't know what the technical name is for the squiggly brackets, so I'll give you an example. I've put it in the comments and you'll see that there's that squiggly bracketed first name. What that's going to do is it's going to pull from my spreadsheet the first name column, and it's going to put that person's name wherever the squiggly brackets are found. So I can show you what an email template looks like. This is sort of, we're moving beyond forms at this point, but I think it might be useful if those of you out there are trying to manage large classes. I'm going to pop over to my email and show you how this mail merge works. So if I go to compose, I'm going to start something new. If I go to, where are my canned responses? Okay, so if I go to templates, see if I have anything. No. Typically, I have, I delete them after I send them, but I have template emails where I would put something like first name, okay? And that would be my template email. When I go back over here to my mail merge, I can choose the template email that I want to work with. Yep, I want to use their contact email column as the thing that I'm sending. This is where I would choose my email template, and it pulls the most recent email that I have. So it's that teaching and learning essentials reminder. And I can send it to 45 emails. I don't actually want to send this to 45 people. So what I will do instead is I'll receive a test email just to show you what it looks like. And then I'm going to close that so I don't actually send that email to all those people, because that would be awkward and not at all pertinent to them. So you'll see that it's sent from the Center for Teaching Excellence, because I have my mail merge set up to be linked. And you'll notice it's pulled the first name from the first name column. So I don't want you guys to stop feeling special, but if you get a mass email from me and it does have your name on it, I totally mail merged you. Sometimes I send like 300 emails with personalized names on them, and I don't want to type 300 different names and 300 different emails. Mail merge is awesome for that. Anything you put in those brackets from the column header, it's going to pull whatever's in that cell. So if I put, I'm going to copy this column, and I'll show you what that would look like in the chat window. So if I put that bracketed section in an email, all I would need to do is do one email to all of my students, and it would send their specific link directly to them. It would pull their special link from their cell, and then they would have access to whatever it is that I've commented on. Okay, but this is something you would have to manage using a mail merge. Mail merges are absolutely wonderful if you send mass email in any way that's not through Folio and you want to send something. This is basically what Folio is doing for you folks when it personalizes messages on the back end. This is all it's doing. You just have to do that yourself when you're not using Folio. And I'm happy to talk at any point in time with anyone who's interested in mail merges or using some of these management systems. I realize that's not what we came here to talk about, so it's just bonus material. Are there any questions for me now? Okay. I will remind you, Lisa, I'll get you in a second. I want to remind you this is a teaching with technology workshop. So if you're working towards badges, you can submit an action plan. And Laura, if you drop that link in the chat window, that'd be awesome. Lisa, what was your question?
You answered it.
Oh,
That's
I
what I
did.
wanted. Yes, the Google Forms plus the Google Sheets plus mail merge. Yes.
Cool, cool. All right. If you need any help with that, if you're testing it out and having problems or questions, just let us know. Happy to talk.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming. I appreciate you taking the time to be here. And there is that action plan form. Otherwise, I'm going to stop the recording now, and I hope you all have a good day.